Heather DeFord. Yay. Hi. So rather than read her bio, because it's very well accomplished, I'm going to speak from my heart. Heather's one of my dear friends. We are in a really beautiful circle together. And we share something that we both love, and that's you all. That's the perinatal process and women in general and specifically. And when I first started working in my birth world, Heather told me to go meet Joanna, and they had started a collective themselves with providers. They're both very, very dedicated physical therapists. And Heather not only is like into the science, she's also into the spiritual, the holistic healing body. So I'm so grateful. Heather and I have been talking about being here and that the night is here, and she's going to share probably one of her favorite topics, the connection between the jaw, right? And the pelvic floor. Yeah. So with that said, I'm going to hand it over to Heather, and thank you again.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So I first just want to give you a little bit of information, some education about how and why the jaw and the pelvic floor are connected. Embryologically, at 15 days after fertilization, there's the embryological development that the dorsal side, the top end turns into the mouth and the bottom end turns into the orifices that for urination and bowel movements. And then there's a fascial connection therefore. So a lot of myofascial release and massage therapists, they talk about experiencing that with their touch, but then they also can feel it. And you know, they have their patients experience it as well. The jaw and the pelvis are on the top and the bottom of the spinal cord, which is where the parasympathetic system lives. The sympathetic system is here and the parasympathetic system is here. Sympathetic stress survival mode, fight or flight mode. So all the nerve roots that relegate those tasks come out of this area. And then in the parasympathetic, those are all the rest and digest and regulation. It's where you're in the parasympathetic drive, you're in a more optimal place for healing and for learning. And so anything in this area is really prone to emotional stress. So we, you know, anger, a lot of gritting, jutting, sad, and then a lot of the same things happens at the pelvic floor. So that's one of the reasons of how they're connected. And then the digestive system, and we kind of talked about it already, but if you think about it energetically, it's like what goes in has to come out. And so if people have aversions to like tactile things in their mouth, that changes their digestive system, and then how it kind of comes out the other end is also, you know, going to be changing and adjusting to what you put in your mouth. Back to the sympathetic and the parasympathetic drive, and that's going to feed into how you can use this connection as a tool. It's not like we're in the sympathetic drive and then we click onto the parasympathetic drive. They kind of take turns throughout the day. And the sympathetic drive, although it's associated with stress and fight or flight and survival mode, we need that. It would be a very lazy world if everyone was always in the parasympathetic drive. We need that to get motivated and get things done in the day. And, you know, I have some handouts and some things to send out to you. And one of them is a TED Talk on Making Stress Your Friend by Kelly McGonigal. Does anyone know who that is? Seen that before, Making Stress Your Friend? She basically does sociological research saying that if we get the stress signals and we don't say, oh no, it's stress, it's bad. And we say, oh, I'm stressed. This is my body getting me ready for the next task. This is my body getting me ready to search out for support, because usually when we are in a stressed out mode, it triggers the hormones to connect. And I really suggest you watching it. I cannot re-articulate it as well as she can. But if we can change that in our mind and say, oh, stress isn't bad, we make stress your friend, then the stress doesn't stay in your body. And so because these two areas hold a lot of tension, and we can think about, okay, I'm not going to let it get stuck in my body. And I'm going to give you some practical exercises and breathing exercises and very specific how to do that. Then you're starting down this path of really changing how your whole system responds to stress signals. And so in one of the other studies she talks about, they took they did a survey, 200 plus people, and asked people what their stressors are. And like the big ones, death, sickness, financial, divorce, and then comorbidities. And you would think that the comorbidities like arthritis, autoimmune, would go hand in hand. But what actually made the predictor of who had more comorbidities was those people who thought stress was bad. And if they were starting to get stressed, they went into that sequelae of, oh no, I'm wrong, I'm bad, I got stressed again, I need to manage stress out of my life. And that just makes people kind of crazy because stress is going to happen. And so I know a lot of these other speakers that come here and talk, they talk about how important it is for mindfulness. And that's one of the big reasons why, is because it's actually important to recognize stress as a motivator. So, and I'm hoping that that can help feed into these exercises that we're going to do. Couple more, just getting to know the pelvic floor. I know some of you probably have worked with pelvic floor PTs, but I'm going to give you my version of why these muscles are so important, especially for pregnancy. So there are 6 major functions of the pelvic floor. One is that they control the pee, poo, and gas. The second one is that they are the bottom part of the core. So the pelvic floor is the bottom, the top is the respiratory diaphragm, and then the transverse abdominis is like makes a cylinder. So it's like a soda can. And then there's some small muscles up and down the vertebrae, they're called multifidi. So there's 4 muscle groups, 1, 2, 3, and then 4. Those 4 muscle groups work together like gears. If one is slow and sluggish, the whole system is faulty. If one of them is tight and rigid and not therefore reflexively available, the whole system is faulty. So anytime you need your core, this should be participating. The pelvic floor should be participating. And I'm going to talk you through what that looks like, because it's not like it needs to be on 100% all the time. In fact, one of the activities is going to learn how to gradate your pelvic floor so that it's efficient. It's not working too hard than it needs to. So controls pee, poo, and gas is part of the core. It's a shelf. It holds up the organs, my uterus and bladder. It holds them all up. And it is a venous and lymph return. So every muscle in our body, when we use it, pumps lymph and blood back to where it needs to go to be filtered. And this pelvic floor muscle group does that for not only these muscles, but for the organs as well. It helps flush things out. It doesn't allow things to get stagnant. And intercourse, women need to have enough flexibility for penetration. Men and women need enough strength for orgasm. And then the last function is the only function that does not pertain to men, and that's if they usher babies into the world. So that's the pelvic floor kind of broken down. And so in the jaw, we know what that, opens and closes the mouth, right? So I want you guys to all put your hands right in front of your ears and open and close your mouth. When you do that, do you feel little bones coming out? Just gonna watch all of you. And I know you said that someone told you that you had TMJ.
Yeah.
Okay. Do you feel any clicking or popping?
I hear a little click.
You hear clicking and popping. Okay. And so you want to hear those two coming out at the same exact time, or feel or sense, and then both coming out at the same time. And now just give yourself some pressure and just kind of let your jaw relax. You remember the movie Home Alone? I may be dating myself. You guys are a little bit younger than me. But you can do that, get that really dopey look on your face. So I just want you to feel into your jaw. These are like different ways to release any tension, going up, back, forward, circles. Okay. So does your jaw feel a little bit better? Did you know that it was tense? And when you did that, did you kind of feel like, oh yeah, that kind of felt good. It's a little tight in there. So when, I know some of you, all of you have had babies, you're pregnant. When you were in labor, did anyone ever tell you, make a low sound instead of that's because when you go or can you feel how that tightens up your jaw or relaxes it when you groan and more of a deeper sensation? So when you are in a relaxed state here, you're more likely to be in a relaxed state in the pelvic floor. So that's why midwives, doulas, doctors will say that. Can you kind of, when you do that, and you can make some noise, it's okay. So when you do that, can you feel how like there's like more pressure up in there versus yeah?
And also your like shoulders go up to your ears versus like we're always like open throat, open pelvis.
Yeah, exactly. So one thing that I see a lot in my practice over and over again, and it's not pregnancy related at all, but if you don't have a good, strong soda can core foundation, then we start to stabilize our head with our neck and our jaw. So we're going to start a practice, and go ahead and lay on down. Are you probably not laying down?
I try to, but it mostly just hurts my back.
Hurts your back. Okay. So you can do it sitting, and that pillow might come in handy just if it feels a little, if you want your hips higher than your knees. Okay. But I'm going to have you go ahead and lay on down, and I'm going to talk you through doing some pelvic rocks. And for you at home, you can do it sitting or laying down, whatever feels most comfortable to you. So bend your knees, feet flat on the ground, and arch your back. Inhale, stick your tail out. Exhale, tuck your tail. And when you exhale, inhale, release your tail, arch your spine. And then this time when we tuck our tail, also do a Kegel. And a Kegel is the activation of that pelvic floor muscle group. So keep it, trying to find a rhythm and a pace that feels comfortable to you with an inhale and exhale. And a Kegel is imagining holding back gas or stopping the flow of pee. So when you tuck your tail, you can also do a glute squeeze and a Kegel at the same time. And inhale, arching your spine up, taking a breath and trying to see if you can reach your perineum with your breath. And then when you're ready to exhale, go ahead and tilt your pelvis so that you're tucking your tail and Kegeling. Good. So somewhere in the middle of that is a neutral spine. So trying to find, and we used to teach these kind of core activation by plastering your low back into the earth. Jane Fonda was really into that. And now we're realizing that in order to train your core, you want to do it in a neutral spine. You don't want to do it in a spine that is flattened to the earth because that's not functional. That's not how we want to be. However, after having a baby, we all have a tendency to still hang out in a swayed back because our body memorized this position. So if you are, the new moms, I always will tell them that you are allowed to do that print of your low back to the earth, to retrain those muscles to go back into a neutral spine. Okay. So when you can just relax into that position, and now without moving your hips, inhale, feel your breath, reach your perineum, and then exhale, Kegel. Inhale, relaxing, feeling your breath, reach your perineum, and then exhale, Kegel. So if this is really confusing and hard, you're not alone. Finding your pelvic floor and knowing how to contract and relax it is a very common, difficult process. And I'll tell you why. In our pelvic floor vulvar area, and for men in the penile area, pelvic floor area, we have very low body awareness nerve endings. So the nerve endings that tell us where our body is in space. There's just a low population there. Plus, it's a muscle group that we can't see. And the action of doing a Kegel is really small. It's like from here to here. So everybody wants to make it a lot bigger. So it's just from there to here. So now when you inhale, relaxing, feeling your pelvic floor soften as you inhale, adjust your pelvic floor. And then inhale, as your diaphragm comes down to let air in to your lungs, compresses on the organs compress on the pelvic floor. And that's how you get that cue to soften the pelvic floor. So any questions with that so far? So far I've just been cueing you to Kegel. And I want you to now put your tongue in the top of your mouth. You're gonna know that. Okay. So before you pull your tongue down, I want you just to place your tongue in the top of your mouth. And then I want you to open and close your mouth, kind of like what we were doing in the beginning. So you're just gonna go like this. Just a little. Yeah, and keeping your tongue in the top of your mouth. And it's not about the lips as much as it is. Yeah. So again, and if this is hard to kind of access and coordinate keeping the tongue in the top of your mouth while you're opening and closing, you might need some manual therapy to do that, because if this action isn't something that you do a lot, then your mouth will remember a different position, and then it's just hard to get back up into that other position. Does that make sense? Okay. So with the tongue gently in the top of your mouth, go ahead and do an inhale, relax, exhale, Kegel, and just notice the sensations in your mouth. And so you can relax your mouth, relax your jaw, and just inhale, relax, exhale, Kegel. Does anyone feel any action in your jaw? Does it feel like it's tensing up a little bit? I feel like clenching. Okay. Anyone else noticing that? So it is possible to disassociate that. And this is one of the ways that knowing and understanding and playing with this connection can help facilitate that parasympathetic drive. When we isolate a certain group and we say turn off another group, we're using the part of our nervous system that's calming, because we have to get quiet and we're, tuning into our body awareness. We're very present to this moment, which takes us out of dissecting the past and projecting for the future. It's a mindfulness practice of getting into know that. So if you can put your hands here and then go back to inhale, relax, exhale, Kegel, and just see if the placement of your hands can just help keep this quiet. Okay. And if that's still tough, you can always just give a little pressure. Sometimes what people feel is when they do a Kegel, they feel this pressure differentiation, and it maybe not be the actual muscles contracting, but they feel movement up in here because you're changing the pressure in your abdomen. So you can leave your hands there if that helps you cue your jaw. And so now I want to go back to your pelvic floor, and feel free to close your eyes and tune into the space between your sit bones, your pubic bone, and tailbone. That's your pelvic floor. And when you do a Kegel, I want you to imagine that that floor is like an elevator. So right now it's in your lobby. It's as relaxed as we hope it can be. And now I want you to Kegel just 20%, like up to the second floor. And then release back down to the pelvic, your lobby. And this doesn't have to be breath coordinated, or you can make it breath coordinated. You can continue to do it on your exhale if you want. But now try to Kegel 50% of effort. And then relax. You can take a nice cleansing breath. Just inhale, relax, exhale, relax, and feeling your breath reach your perineum. And that's a good way to help get down to your true lobby. When after having a baby, it's very common for the doctors and nurses to say, go do your Kegels. And I really wish that there's a little bit more education, because the relaxation is just as important as the contraction. So now I want you to go ahead and Kegel up to 100%. Give it all you got. Give it so much that it's like your glutes are going to start to work. And that's usually when you feel the jaw or the neck coming on, right? So go ahead and relax your pelvic floor if you haven't. So that connection is a part of called overflow, that if we're doing some work, other muscles, other neighbors will try to help. And because this has a connection, then it's very common that they'll try to help each other out. And again, if we're not moving from a really strong foundation, and when you're pregnant, it's just, you don't have access to your core as much. So this part of our body starts to stabilize. So you may not be as successful at this when you don't have a baby in your belly. You might be a little bit more successful without. So now I would like you to, we're going to go through that gradation drill and go ahead and Kegel to 20%. And from there, go to 50%. And then there, go to 80%. Try to find the threshold where your jaw stays relaxed. And then you can go back down. And you can play with that nuance just a little bit. And as you're doing that, and as you're just playing with gradation, different levels of effort, it's a matter of like picking up a feather or a brick. So,
What does that mean? What do you mean?
So when you go to pick up a feather, you're going to use less muscular effort. If you go pick up a brick, you're going to, be a lot more. Like if you ever went to go pick up a gallon of something and you thought it was full, and you like went with a lot of force, but it was empty, and so it was just like super easy. So our mind prepares, and it's like, oh, I'm going to pick up this big box. Well, if the box is full of feathers, then you're going to go in there with a lot of effort, and it's, you're going to get off balance. And so gradation, if you're still kind of playing with that gradation, like going to 20%, 50%, 80, 100, and then back down, you can continue to play with that, because I'm going to speak to what happens at these different levels. At 20% or less, that's postural stability. So I don't have a backrest right now. My core is keeping me from doing this. So my pelvic floor is like 15, 10%. I don't recognize that. Those nerve endings in that part of my body is not registering that there's anything happening. If I move out of my base of support, I can kind of feel some action happening. It's like 20, 25%. I come to stand and I'm in this position where I don't have a good center of gravity. My core has to really work. It's like 40%. I pick up the babe, 50% of effort. Cough, sneeze, or jump, that's 80, 100%. Close the doors, right? So it's an interesting thing for you to play with these gradations, because pain, trauma, and inflammation make muscles go in a guarded mode. Well, having kids, pain, trauma, inflammation. So you are now telling and talking and communicating. You are doing neuromuscular re-education. You are reminding your muscles, this is how it works. It's not just on or off. It's not just 100% or nothing. It has these different levels of gradation. Questions? Does that make sense? Great. So this is the beginning of our core workout for anywhere. If you're going to Beau Co or any Pilates, yoga, you want to be able to move from your core. So we're going to challenge our core. And as we challenge our core and load it, requiring it to work more and more, we're going to start feeling where that threshold is where we can keep our jaw relaxed. Okay. And again, if it's sometimes you need manual therapy, actually, go ahead and sit on I'm going to teach you a neck release, a front neck release. So unfortunately, I'm not going to be able to take smartphones away. Like, they're here to stay. And so I tell my daughters, if you want a phone, you have to do postural exercises, because you're on laptops and everything is here. And it just makes me cringe walking around schools, because I'm really worried about the future necks of our world. So you're going to come into this position and chin down and use your fingers and your palm to anchor that skin, that fascia. And then you're going to look up. Go up until you can't go anymore. And then you can go back down. And you're going to repeat this 5 times. And as you look up, you're feeling, imagining your chin, going up to the ceiling. So the reason why we do it this way is to really stretch this like just to hang with your back, with your neck back is not good for your neck, because in the back here, we have all these nerves and blood vessels coming out. And so we can't just hang out and occluding those. So this is a nice way to open up the front of your neck. These muscles, they're neck muscles, but they're also jaw openers. So this is the muscles down in here that open your jaw. If you have tight masseter and temporalis, you're going to have these muscles are tight because the reciprocal muscles, right? One flexes, the other one extends, relaxes. So, and then you can kind of just hang out there and see, this is, I can't really go anymore because I'm holding this down, and then I'm not compromising the back, those nerves and things. Okay. And then in a neutral position, an option is just to kind of love up the front of your neck, but just some like motion is lotion. Like, there's a lot of going on in here, and all those structures want to glide really nice to one another. Okay. So the best way to release a jaw is to get in there and use a glove and relax. And if you've never had that done before, it's a game changer. It really changes, your relationship with that tension or unknown tension, that silent kind of holding that goes on. Because even just doing this, it's different. And I know some of you said you had pelvic floor. It's the same thing internally. When you release inside the mouth or vaginally, those releases last a lot longer than me manually trying to release through the skin, through the subcutaneous, through various levels of fascia. It's just kind of a nice thing to know that you can get more release inside than outside. So you can go ahead and lay it back on down. And when setting, I'm going to set you guys up for a dead bug series. If you know what that means, it's a core stability exercise. And if you feel your neck coming on, a couple things you can do. You can raise your chin a little bit to open up the front of your neck and gently push your head down to the earth, like 10%. And if you're sitting, you can just lift up your head for a little bit, because then you're going to change the length tension of these muscles and they're not going to be able to grip as much. So core activation is a Kegel and then knitting your ribs together. So once upon a time, we used to train weight training to go, and then you do the big work. And what happened to this soda can? The lid came off. But in all actuality, if you're using the soda can idea appropriately for your core engagement, the soda can gets smaller in all dimensions. So it's going to get shorter as well as come in. So with that in mind, do your best core engagement. And yeah, you're going to hug that baby. Hug that baby with your, and that's actually a really good cue. That's exactly what you're doing. And you don't want to lose your ribs. You don't want to do this. In yoga, there's a lot of heart opening, which I adore. But I'm always thinking, open your heart, but not at the expense of losing your foundation. So if you're going to open up your heart and then your ribs are just out there flying around, then you're not moving from a good foundation. So engage your core. Soda can get shorter in all dimensions, and your Kegel, is like 20-50%. So hold that and breathe in your chest. Check in with your jaw. Relax your jaw if you need to, by placing the tongue in the top of your mouth and opening and closing. And now release your core. So I'm going to try to cue you to hold your core engagement for like 10 to 15 seconds. If you can't keep it in for that long, hold it that long, that's okay. You can stop early, or if you want to keep going, that's possible as well. So for you to over here, place your hands on your belly. Yep. And when you're using your core, you feel everything go in. So engage your core again, Kegel, and then knit your ribs together. If you feel your stomach coming up into your hands, that's doming. And that means that you're not using your true core. And it's really important for preventing diastasis recti. Have you heard this? Okay, cool. So you can relax your core now. And so practice just breathing up in your chest, because the reality is that when you're using your core, you're not able to take big, deep diaphragmatic breaths. So you are doing a little bit more chest breathing. It's quicker, it's not as deep. So we're just going to practice with that. Engage your core, breathe in your chest. And if that's easy, you can lift one leg and put it back down, and making sure that you're not doning. And then for you, any sort of challenge that you are doing sitting, you can even doing this, just moving your arms. It's physics. It's going to just make it harder for this to stay put. So this is, and then as you're doing that, check in with your jaw. Are you able to engage your core without clenching your jaw? And if your jaw's clenching, then the activity, the demand is too intense for your core to really have that move from that foundation. So take a break. And it's Madeline? Marion, sorry. What are you feeling?
Like below, like
it's where you're noticing your jaw clenching as you turn on your play.
it's not moving, but it feels tight.
Yeah. So and sometimes, like I was saying, like in order to really experience have the nuance of this, it's most ideal to start with a released jaw, because then you kind of have a baseline more so. But were you able to decrease the amount of tension in your jaw by just placing your tongue in the top of your mouth?
Kept it there.
Okay. So it's just a work in progress. So the reality is that when we're really doing heavy workouts and we're really going for it, and we're doing high intensity, like high weights, your eyelashes are going to try to help you. Everything is helping. And that's okay. That's fine. But it's also important to experience this other way of moving, because that will trickle into function, so that every movement you're doing is not like, everything isn't turning on. And chopping vegetables, I realized years ago that my face is contorting and I'm just chopping vegetables. Pulling weeds, same deal. Like my face just gets all scrunched up. It's kind of ridiculous, So that again is how playing with this connection and really learning tools and using those tools during your workouts to get strong and keep this relaxed here can help you function throughout the day. So when you're chopping vegetables, you have this memory of like, oh, maybe I actually need to engage my core a little bit, because I'm using my shoulder and my hands up in here, and that can unload the jaw. Holding kids. This is a classic hurt child. I do this. I was just holding a baby this past weekend, and I was like, this, I'm like, what the heck, what's going on? And if my jaw was all crazy and tight and things like that. So after this talk, I hope that you'll kind of be able to feel how this can happen throughout your day. So let's go ahead and do you have a question? Oh, okay.
I have a question.
Okay.
Is there a correlation, like for the new mamas, is it tighter, like closer to birth versus like if I were on a mat doing it and I had a baby 14 years ago, like, is there a relaxing that naturally happens the further away you are from the birth, or is this specific to new mamas?
I think that ideally you would have less and less tension in your jaw as time goes on. But the tricky thing about that is muscles are kind of stupid. They just do what the nerve tells them to do. And if a nerve once upon a time said guard, there's danger, that muscle just continues to do that unless you say, okay, relax, contract, turn it on, turn it off. Unless you get a lot of exercise and you're moving, and you're giving another input to that specific muscle, then that's the most ideal way to like break up that pattern. So when you have a baby, you're probably doing all sorts of crazy stuff with your face, right? So a lot of people do say after birth, labor and delivery, their jaw and their neck is really, really sore. In fact, you came to my house and treated me after Leah was born because I was just like, oh my God, my neck. And I looked at the videos and I was just like all in the neck. And it was just like, oh yeah, that's why my neck is so jacked up right now. So, you know, I'm a big fan of self-care after you having a baby to kind of put things back together. And that is always what I do postpartum. We always do some jaw releasing. I didn't share this at first, but this is kind of, I think, one of the most interesting things. So when I got trained in pelvic floor, I was trained by a group of women that started a clinic, and they specialized in the jaw and the pelvic floor. And that happened because anecdotally, one person would come in and they had issues with other things. And then also craniosacral is a real hallmark for treating both areas, and you learn a lot of techniques. And so they just started to see this connection. And this was close to 20 years ago. And so they told me, if you're having someone who has a really tight pelvic floor and you can't get it to relax manually, relax their jaw first. And that's the ticket. I mean, that has so helpful. I get in there and relax the jaw, and then the pelvic floor is just like, okay, good idea. That was good. So I've seen it empirically through my own practice, and then there's lots of research out there as well. So,
And that's why I think it's really tricky when the provider says, like, do your Kegels or something without more information. Because if you're like hypertonic or tense or whatever, like you don't need to do that. Like it probably makes you even more tense.
Well, yeah. And then it's also a matter of the relaxation. So there's an interesting study, taping your two fingers together, 30 minutes. Take the tape off. Don't look at the fingers. Someone touches the pointer. You can't tell if it's your pointer or the finger. As time goes on, the body figures it out. Well, 10 months, a lot longer than 30 minutes. Your proprioceptive, your body awareness is much different. And so when this is happening, you have your core stability, your neck does just need to keep your head on straight more than it would otherwise. So everything kind of tightens up. So it kind of just goes back to, there's a lot to be said for after having a baby, like kind of treating all these different spots and allowing it, and it's going to take time and proprioception training, body awareness training to remember that this actually really hurts and this feels better on your spine. So that's part of it. Any questions? Any other questions? Okay. So with that drill, do you want to try it one more time and do harder work, or did you guys kind of find that threshold where your jaw, or did your jaw stay soft?
It stayed softer than I would have expected, because I think I hold a lot of tension.
Good, yeah.
Here.
Well, as soon as you're putting your awareness on it, you might be able to correct that.
Yeah, turning my tongue up, I think helped a lot.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And here's the thing: if you're doing this, you're not clenching. So I've had a lot of high-end professional athletes who are trying to get down the mountain on skis or bike, and so we'll put biofeedback and have them sprint. Can you keep this soft and still? And balance your checkbook. Can you keep this soft and think about something really stressful? So you don't need fancy equipment for that, but just this conversation of ourselves, your tomorrow is going to be different because you're going to have this new awareness of it. So when you're at your next workouts, maybe slow it down a little bit and try to find that threshold where you can keep your jaw relaxed and you can still use that core. Does that make sense? Any questions? So, in general, because you have kids, we're talking about this foundation here. And if you have a high hip here, it's going to affect what goes on up here. It's going to affect what goes on here, because at the base of our skull, where it goes onto the spine, is the foundation for the jaw. So this really doesn't have, this has more to do with your kids. And it can help you as well. But if you have a child who's getting orthodontia and they are going to try to make this bite as beautiful as possible, it's now being recommended that you clear the orthopedic line. You clear the cervical spine. You make sure that these joints are have an open pack position, that they have as much room to do what they want to do, because jutting, a lot of people do that, sad, anger, mask wearing. We all kind of would subconsciously jut our chin out to get more air space in there. So now this joint, this is the condyle, this is the capsule, is like slammed up in the front. And maybe one side's a little bit different than the other. And then you get these teeth all lined up perfectly. Meanwhile, your joint capsule is posteriorly tight. And so, great, you've now, you did your orthodontia, you're in your 20s and you have a whiplash injury and it's starting this painful process, and you get this adjusted and you get this opened up, and now your bite is off. And so, I mean, I can give you all different types of stories, and that there's a process of people getting their bite fixed out of adults to get rid of TMJ or headaches, but they don't treat the jaw or the neck. And so that it's just this cycle of getting this fixed, and then years later, oh, my neck is off. So it's recommended adjustment at the braces, PT, just, mouth guards, and whatever, there's all these different Invisalign, different ways when you get it adjusted. It doesn't have to happen every single time as a leapfrog, but I would definitely suggest that you just get your spinal cord as symmetrical as possible.
How do you what's an example of that?
So you can go to chiropractic care, you can go to a PT. I have a list of factors that dentists, orthodontists should be aware of. A teen, an adolescent comes in with scoliosis, or they've had concussions, or they've had whiplash injuries, or they are already dealing with headaches, or they already have neck pain, or they have just really bad posture. Really, really, like, this is a whole nother conversation of what this does to your jaw. And then you get your teeth all nice in there, but then if you somehow someday hopefully get the message that this is how your head position is going to be, it's going to throw your bite off. So having good posture.
Heather, can I ask a question?
Sure.
So I have a child that was in braces much younger and has to go back into braces because despite even wearing retainers, the bite has changed.
Okay.
So we're now in the process of restarting orthodontia. If I heard you correctly, I need to be treating the jaw or the neck first?
In conjunction.
Okay.
So, and maybe the reason why they need to go back to braces is because their neck wasn't in a symmetrical foundation as possible. And so now their alignment is off again. I mean, that does happen. That's why a lot of people, despite wearing retainers, are like, I need braces again.
Yeah.
I have scoliosis. No one checked my jaw before they did braces. I had jaw surgery. They broke it and moved it forward and all this stuff. No one thought about, looking at below, And I've been at these conferences, and it's kind of funny because the dentists are like, when you're in school, they make you feel like a god because you can move teeth. They're like, you feel so empowered, and like they don't talk about anything. So it's cool to go to these conferences because we're in the same, it's like half dentists, half PTs, and you get to like talk and share like terminologies and more. Anyway, it's humbling. So
wait, I want to say one thing, Tracy. Without I don't know what your expectation was, but just for contextually, I have two kids that are out of braces, and they both had braces twice. And that was like when I had braces, but it just seemed to be the way that they were doing things. This was like 5 and 10 years ago, but just giving you a heads up that I don't know. It might be a program, and it might be something's off.
True. And there might not be anything off. There might not be.
Right.
You just don't know until you go in and assess.
Yeah.
And the reality is like me, I've had scoliosis since puberty. Like, I'm not going to be even. I'm never going to have a straight spine, but I want to have mobility. And so it doesn't mean that everything has to be even and level, but you want to be able to have it be functional and have, as strong, stable foundation as possible. And so the guy that I studied with, he's given talks of how the pelvis and the hips change the bites. There's studies on putting a lift in one shoe and then studying the bite and then studying the bite. So it's, it's definitely, connected. And this is now you guys have a lot more insight on how this connection might be able to be used as a tool and how to, not let it be a detriment as well. So that's the information I wanted to share. Does anyone else have any other questions or?
If I am hearing some clicking in my jaw,
Oh,
is there anything like special, like any other stretches besides the one you taught us?
So, and do you have any pain?
Not really.
Okay.
Occasionally, like if I don't chew gum anymore, because I know if I chew gum, I will get
you
pain
expect-
afterwards.
oh, okay.
Yeah. So
Yeah. So this is the time where you actually want to get intervention
okay.
because the clicking is that disc dislocating and then relocating. So kind of subluxing and then going back into position. When you don't pop anymore, people are like, oh, I stopped popping and now I have a lot of pain. That's a common pattern because now that disc is living forward. It's not reducing. It's not going back. So you have no more buffer in your bone and bone. So the jaw, that disc that kind of glides forward and back as you open, it is guided forward and back by a muscle. It's called the lateral pterygoid. What brings it back is the relaxation of that lateral pterygoid. In our body, usually it's perfectly divinely orchestrated. This contracts, this one pulls it. So you have an opposite and opposing muscle. This is like the only place that it doesn't exist. So it's retrodiscal tissue that doesn't contract. So if you have a disc that is coming in and out, the clicking and the popping, I can't teach you an exercise to get that disc back. My only recourse is to help you teach how that you relax that muscle.
Okay.
Teach you your own mobilizations, teaching you, what we just went through, just so that you're not overusing that jaw. Because if these muscles are stressed, then that lateral pterygoid is definitely going to participate. Does that make sense? And then it's also a matter of doing some joint mobilizations and relearning what muscles need to turn on at what time. So there's a little bit of neuromuscular reeducation to keep that disc doing its job and coming in and out of its position. So one last thing, because I don't want you to stress out. If you do have a disc that starts to live more forward and it is painful, there are some exercises to turn that retrodiscal tissue into a disc, into a pseudo disc. So I've helped a lot of people who they've come to me at that point, and we're not going to get that disc back to where it needs to go, but we can turn that retrodiscal tissue into like a callus so that they're not in as much pain.
Interesting.
It's not as ideal, but just so you know.
Okay.
There's always options. Our bodies really are good at healing and finding new paths of ease. So just a little bit more about myself. I am a physical therapist. I specialize in the pelvic floor. Usually I start with this, I just jump right in. And I work out of the Shamanic Twist. And I teach a mommy and me yoga, and it's a sound bath and a yoga class. It's really fun to get afterwards, like they go and do the chimes over the mamas. The ones that have been there a lot, they know the drill, and they know they need to go give a compliment or like a gratitude to their mom.
Children. Oh, that's so cute. So what are the ages that you mainly come?
Up to 6. I mean, we are now calling it family yoga because 6-year-olds are a lot easier than 18 months. So I was like, why am I just saying, toddlers or babies? Those older ones are actually really helpful. So, I say bring a baby in your belly, in your hand, or in your arms. It's great. And yeah, this is the type of work that I do out there. I was at the hospital for 12 years and I started the pelvic floor program there. And now it just kind of feels good I'm able to treat more holistically, and I can see people for an hour and a half if I want to. Do a lot more integrative, holistic, because the way that it would work before, when you're in that big system, it's like you're here for the shoulder, and then want you to get in and out for the shoulder, but now I have a lot more latitude to like treat holistically. So if you're coming in for your jaw, I'm going to be looking at your ankles because that affects your hips. You're going to fix this. So I like treating that way a lot better. It feels more like true and authentic to my practice. So any other questions?
As far as relaxing the jaw during like labor and delivery situation, would you still recommend tongue at the roof of the mouth to help with that during breathing?
Yeah, and like and I know I didn't say this out loud, but when you put your tongue there, it's not like you're pressing really hard. It's a placement. It's like where it just kind of lives. So that's a nuance because I could see a lot of women, thrusting it up there. And I mean, I don't think that's going to make any problems, but it's just not going to do the effect that you wanted to. But, I can teach you some just releases, or your partner, I don't know. Do doulas ever get trained in releasing jaws, I wonder?
Well, I haven't, but
You
that
haven't?
doesn't say much. I mean, it's not in,
It's not, I was just
Basic
curious. I never thought about that before.
no.
That's an interesting idea, as one of their tools to like, let's release your jaw.
Yeah.
Help soften the. Oh, that's kind of a cool idea. Yeah, I'll teach you. Yeah. So did that answer your question?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I won't shove my tongue to the roof of my mouth.
But like going low is really like that is it guttural. Like
Yeah.
it's moving energy down, and it does like take away the fear
Yeah.
of like,
Yeah.
if you can remember.
Yeah. I mean, and they've done like electrical, like biofeedback studies of pelvic, like a sensor on the pelvic floor, and then doing different pitches, and it is different.
Well, thank you so much. Any
You're
other
welcome.
questions?
You're welcome. You're welcome.
Thank you very much. Good info.
You're welcome.
Tracy.
Great
Cool.
information. I wish I had heard this before I had kids.
Yeah.
I love it.
That's why we started Hive. Everything that we didn't have.
We're now offering them.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. Thank you everybody for joining, and we look forward to seeing you next month for,
Actually,
oh, sorry, we're taking a break next month.
August. Yeah, for gentle parenting. Okay.
There we go.
Yeah, that's low.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a
Thank-
wonderful.
When are you having your baby?
September 20th.